So it's 4 p.m. here in Germany, Central European summertime, although I'm not quite sure about the summer when I look outside the window here in central Germany. But yeah, I would like to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to our session on electric buses here during the Daring Cities Conference 2020. My name is Jens Giersdorf, and I'm working for the German Cooperation Agency, GIZ, on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation on Electric Mobility. And I'm glad to moderate this today. I recently the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation here in Germany, and I'm glad that we have a lot of partners that are dealing with the issue on electric buses worldwide, partners of the TUMI initiative that will also be partners of our E-Bus mission. Yeah, and I would like to thank them for their time and sharing their experience with us today during this side event. And before we start with the presentations and the discussions, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ruben Werchern from the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. He is Deputy Head of the division that is dealing with environmental policy, urban development, mobility, circular economy, and marine conservation. Yeah, and he will give us some insights into the activities of the ministry when it comes to urban mobility, sustainable urban mobility, and electric bus support. So, yeah, dear Mr. Ruben Werchern, floor is yours.
Thank you, Jens, for your kind introduction. Dear Ms. Ortiz, dear Mr. Courageous, dear Ms. Albuquerque, dear Mr. Parashar, dear ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this side event of the Daring Cities Conference on decarbonizing transport, the case of electric buses. So why do we need to speak about e-buses, electric buses? The reasons are, to give some answers, that cities are generating 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and transport has a growing share in these emissions. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us very clearly again that we need both climate-friendly and clean public transport, which protects both the global climate and the air in the cities, and affordable and safe public transport, which ensures access for all city residents to jobs and public services, such as health services. E-buses have a big role in achieving low emissions and providing mobility to everybody. However, mass rollout of e-buses faces many challenges, as you may know, such as financing models, tendering, charging, infrastructure, or operation. At our Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, we want to support cities worldwide to become daring cities, to tackle climate change, and to pioneer sustainable mobility systems. That is why we've launched the global program TUMI Volt. TUMI Volt started earlier this year to support pilot and deep dive cities when it comes to the challenge of how to integrate low emission technologies into sustainable urban mobility systems. At the UN Climate Summit last year, we also launched the Action Towards Climate-Friendly Transport, in short ACT, initiative, with the goal to pass the way for 100,000 e-buses on the roads in developing and emerging countries in the next 4 years. The TUMI E-Bus mission is our response to that commitment. TUMI Volt is part of our effort to accelerate the mobility transformation in our cities. TUMI, the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative, is one of the ministry's core climate initiatives. Together with 10 international partners, among which are city networks such as ICLEI, Development Bank, think tanks, and others, TUMI has become the leading global implementing initiative for sustainable urban mobility. Through TUMI, we were able to train more than 2,500 decision makers and experts worldwide. We are implementing 15 pilot projects and have mobilized a project financing volume of 2.1 billion euros for sustainable mobility projects through our development bank, KfW. To sum it up, electric buses are key to transforming urban mobility since they can help improve quality of public transport services and reduce emissions. But since these improvements also require investment in a time where cities have to struggle with the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to find innovative financing solutions. It is therefore with great pleasure that I invite you today to join our experts from the city of Bogota, from C40, from WRI Brazil, and from GIZ India, that will debate the challenges that cities face and how they tackled these challenges, transforming them into opportunities. I dare to say that we are already at the beginning of a silent and an actual silent revolution within public transport. And that with global cooperation and local commitments, we can help to speed up this revolution. Therefore, thank you all for joining us today, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussions that we are about to have. Jens, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ruben, for this welcome words from the ministry and for giving some insights into the activities and the rationale behind supporting electric buses worldwide. And thank you also for introducing the TUMI Volt and E-Bus Mission. I think that you make very clear why and green sustainable urban transport, and you already mentioned some of the challenges the cities have to tackle when it comes to the introduction of electric buses. I think that our first speaker, Ms. Maria Fernanda Ortiz from the Transmilenio bus rapid transport network in Bogota, Colombia, surely can share some interesting experiences when it comes to tendering electric buses and how to create the political commitment necessary for this introduction. I would like to thank her that she is able, substituting Mr. Felipe Ramirez, who unfortunately wasn't able to attend us due to another meeting with the mayor of Bogota yet to join right now. So I'd like, before giving the floor to Ms. Maria Fernanda Ortiz, who has been working in Transmilenio for the past 2 or 3.5 years, I'd like to ask you, all the participants, to put their questions and remarks in the chat on the right side, so we can have a short questions and answer session after each presentation. So, Ms. Maria Fernanda Ortiz, I would like to give the word to you. The floor is yours.
Yes, I would share my presentation. Let me a minute, please. Please confirm me that you are seeing my presentation.
Yes, we can see our screen. Okay.
So thank you for the invitation. We are pleased to talk about this topic in this workshop. E-buses is a very important project for Bogota and for Transmilenio. We are working on it for about 10 years, I think, and it has been really difficult to at the end have e-buses in Bogota. We are waiting for about 500 buses by the end of this year, so we are very happy to have it. But after 2 years of hard work, this is a big success for the city and for the country, and we are pleased to talk to you about this. So the 2 questions that we are trying to answer in this presentation is, first, how to involve and create a political commitment at the city level to promote the electrification of public transport, and what can other cities learn from Bogota in this case, that we are already conduct large large-scale tendering processes for electric buses. So for the first question, we have to say that we consider that there are 3 pillars to create a political commitment. The first one, and for us is the most important, is the technical knowledge of the operation of these buses. The main objective of this is to build trust. We have to demonstrate that these buses are the best for the city. And we have to have also feasibility analysis and technical, economic, financial, and environmental sustainability of the technology. As you already mentioned, this project has a lot of challenges in terms of technical and financial things. So we, in a first phase, we have to have the technical and the financial viability to implement this project. Also, we have to align market conditions with goals, objectives, and other requirements that we have in the city and in the country. In this point, it's very important to have, for example, the providers of the fleet to know our specific requirements. We have a very fragile system because we move about 5 million people by day. So we have to be very careful in the decisions we made and the buses that we choose for the system. In Bogotá, we have about 2,500 articulated buses for the BRT system and about 6,000 buses for the zonal system, that are the routes, the long routes that are in mixed traffic. So we have to align that market conditions. And in a third point of view, we have to align key actors. So this is very important to have public, private, society, and other actors align with the goals of the city. We have to generate consultation spaces and workshop tables with all the actors. A main issue here is to have the political will, because this technology, as I mentioned, faces a lot of challenges, not only in the technical points, but also in the financial point of view. We have in Bogotá a particular thing. In Colombia is very common in other countries, but in Colombia is very particular, and that is the city subsidy the public transport system in about 25%. This is very common in Europe and in United States, and also in other countries of LATAM. But in Colombia, we are almost only the city that have these subsidies and we don't need the users first to pay all the cost of the system, and this is very important. So regarding the cost of the technology, we have a lot of support from the political will. And also we have to manage public policies and generate regulatory framework and standards from the local government and also from the national government. This is I think that the first phase of the technology in Colombia has been all the framework and the normative framework that we need to put this fleet into the operation of the system. In the center of this is Transmilenio as the entity that is in charge of the management of the system. We lead all these 3 pillars. We are very committed since the beginning to include low emissions fleet in the system, just to have a more sustainable system and to reduce our impact in the city. And we are very we know that we are like the first system in Colombia to have many of the innovative, like we are almost all the time the first in things in Colombia. So we have to give a very good example to make other cities in Colombia to take decisions about these topics. We have had a long learning process. We have tested this kind of technology since 2010. And as I say, we are going to have the big fleet by the end of this year, 2020. So it's about 10 years working on this. And we have tested mainly two kinds of buses. The first one is articulated for the BRT system, and the other one is a smaller bus for the zonal system that are the long routes on the system. These are the two kind of buses that we have tried, and we have implemented short duration tests with simulated load, because in our system we have routes that are with high load, and we have some conditions in Bogota. We are very high in a mountain, and also we have highest loads in some part of the city. So we have to be careful with this kind of particularity. So these tests are being very, very important for us. We have studies including these results, and we include in some point long-term tests with one or two buses in the system that allow to prove that the technical point of view is working with these buses in the city. So we've been working for 10 years to have the framework to have the first tendering process in Bogota, the first large-scale tendering process in the city. So what is the learning or the lessons that we can talk about in Bogota? So Bogota, as I say, we have two kind of systems. In this point, we have three, and in Transmilenio, we have the trunk lines that are the red ones, that is the BRT system. We have also the blue lines that are the long routes, the zonal component. We also have a cable car, and we're going to have the first metro line in about 5 years. Now the e-buses, we are included them in the blue system. That are the long routes in the city. We want to include also the e-buses into the BRT system, but we think that the market is not ready for it. So we are working hard to have a lot of buses, at least I think 1,000 buses, electric buses into the blue system. So in 2008, we defined that we have a need to buy 3,250 buses for the blue system from two typologies. So Padrón and Buseton. Padrón is the 80 passengers capacity, and the Buseton is the 50 passengers capacity bus. In fact, the Padrón is very easy to find in the whole world, but the Buseton is not easy to find. So the Buseton is been a big challenge for the market. This is one of the reasons for incorporate the market in the working table since the beginning, because as I say, we have zones in the city that we need this smaller bus. These buses are distributed in 18 functional units that are like small zones in the city, and they are distributed in the center, in the south, and the west part of Bogota. we divided this need into different tendering processes. The first one was in 2019, and this tendering process was a competition just between electric participants, electric buses participants, and this was the first main decision. We decided in that point that if we put electric buses with other technologies in the same tender process, maybe the electric buses would not have the best opportunity to win. So to have like a minimum of electric buses in the system, we decide to design a tender process just for electric buses. This year we have a tender process that combines all technologies, and this is because I think that the market have evolved and improve how to participate in these processes in Bogota. So now they can have a competition with other technologies and can win. To help this, we have designed some incentive for 100 electric technology in the tender process that is open right now in Bogota. And we hope that we can have at least 7% of the share for electric buses. As a result of the tender process in 2019, we have bought 483 buses that, as I mentioned, they are get into operation by the end of this year. And we also bought the last year 794 new buses of other technologies as a minimum of standard Euro 6. That for us is the minimum of technology, is the technology with the minimum standard that we need. So we have right now like about 1,000 buses, 1,200 buses, low emissions that are that are going to going into operation in the next about 4 or 5 months. And right now we have a need of by 1,300 buses that, as I mentioned, the minimum standard is again Euro 6, but we have some incentive for the 100 electric buses. And in the next year, in 2021, we are going to buy another 1,000 buses, and we hope that the whole fleet would be electric. So we are going to have in the system at least we hope like 2,000 buses, electric buses, and they have to get into operation in the next 2 years in the city. So, as I mentioned, we need to do very important studies since the 3 points, main points of view or perspective: the technical, the financial, and the legal point of view. This structuring have some particular premises since the beginning. The first one is I already mentioned that the competition was only for the electric technology. We did a deep market analysis, and however, during the tender process, participants were far less than the participants that we saw in the market analysis. This was a surprise, and we think that was because of the particularities of Bogota and Colombia were not familiar for the companies, the Chinese companies and the European companies that wants to participate in this. So at the end, we just have one provider, that is BYD, and we hope that at least 2 more were participating in the process, and was a big surprise. We think that in the process that we are doing right now, we can have another providers because they already get into the market, into the Colombian market, and they already know how we work and how the tender process works here. The other thing that we did is to separate the business model. We have a fleet supplier and a fleet operator. I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. And this model is very important to have bankability for the projects and participation of foreign companies. These are concession contracts that is very important. And the distribution of the risks is very I think that it's more for the private than for the public. So it's very important to have a good division of these risks. And the other thing is that Transmilenio decide to provide the depots. This is very important because the infrastructure, to secure the infrastructure and to have the infrastructure in place at the right time is very important. So Transmilenio decide to secure this depot in the operation. So and in this part we have a very good partner that is Enel Codensa, that is in charge of the electric network in Bogota. We also had a lot of working tables with key actors in the financial and the insurance sector to analyze the bankability, the risk analysis, and the warranties. And at the end, the other key factor is that user fares do not include the total cost of the technology. As I say, Bogota subsidy about 25% of public transport system cost, and this is very important to have the viability of the project. So we have a model that is divided into fleet provider that is in charge of the fleet supply and the administration of some parts of the fleet. Is a concession contract signed with Transmilenio, and we also have a concession contract with the fleet operator. And the fleet operator is in charge of fleet operation, fleet maintenance, and the operation and maintenance of the bus depot. And as I said, Enel Codensa is in charge of the infrastructure, the recharging infrastructure, and also the other parts of the depot. And between the fleet provider and the fleet operator, they sign a thing that we call a private agreement. These are the links for all the tender process that we have last year and the new one that is open right now. You can see there all the details of the bidding processes, and you can and we are very open to answer questions about this. As I say, this has been a very hard process to us, but at the end, I think that we are we succeed and with success, and we are going to have the bigger electric fleet in Colombia, and I think that next year will be the bigger one, the biggest one in Latin America and maybe America. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, very impressive. You said you are always first in Colombia, and right now at the end you said you probably have the largest fleet not only in Colombia, but in Latin America or all Americas. We have a question from Avery here when it comes to the guard that, Avery is also saying that Bogota does a lot and is helping lead the way in urban mobility. The question is how we can better learn about from Bogota's experience. Maybe you can give us some insight when you're always first in Colombia or even in Latin America, what you're also doing when it comes that other cities are searching for this kind of experiences, what you usually can offer when it comes to this exchange on your experiences.
Okay, so how can we better learn about and from Bogota's work? It's a very good question. I think that we need to talk more, and we need to participate more in this kind of spaces to give our lessons learned, because I think that as you say, we have done a lot, and it's been a very rough path. But I think that, as I say, we're very open to answer all your specific questions about the thing that we have done on this topic. I can give you all my details, my contact details, and yes, I can answer all your specific questions. There are so many. It's fine. We can answer. It's not a problem. And the other question is, who owns the risk of battery performance and other technology risk? The risk is assigned to the provider, the concessionary that is in charge of providing the fleet. This concessionary has an agreement with the company that I don't know how is the name in English, but as with BYD, for example, they have a contract that reflects all the things that we ask for the concessionary, and they have all the risks related with the technology and the battery thing. In fact, we ask for autonomy that is 260 kilometers per recharge, but they can do it with one battery in the life cycle or two batteries in the life cycle as they decide. So we don't ask for example, to buy two batteries in the life cycle. They can decide that, but they have to maintain the autonomy of the vehicles for the life cycle. And yeah, that's where we designed that point.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I can also compliment that this is exactly the idea of this kind of side event today and of the TUMI E-Bus mission. There are a lot of partners here today, like C40 Cities, WAI, ICLEI, ITDP, others that are exactly planning to create this kind of network and peer-to-peer learning from cities that are front when it comes to the electrification of public buses, and replicate this kind of experience together with other cities. So I think that is exactly the idea to deliver this kind of forum for this kind of exchange. So thank you very much for your presentation, and you put also your contact details here into the chat for the persons that would like to get directly in contact with you. The other questions the last question you already answered is the perfect questions also for our next presenter here, for our next speaker, Anthony Courage from C40 Cities. He is Clean Transport Finance Manager, and he will exactly talk about the new or innovative business models that could help attract financing and investment into electric buses for the cities. So, dear Anthony, I would like to give the word to you. If you're ready, thank you very much for the presentation, Maria Fernanda.
Yeah.
And Anthony, please go on.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. This is a great segue into my presentation. I'm going to talk about innovative financing models to accelerate e-bus transition and implementation. A lot of what I'm going to talk about are lessons that were learned in cities that have been paving the way to accelerate this transition, and Bogota has been at the forefront of that. And so it's really building on the efforts of cities like Bogota. And so I'm going to dive a little deeper into some of the concepts that Ms. Ortiz just presented, particularly with the commercial models that were used, and really kind of try to. I think there was a question at the beginning about how can we learn about some of the things that Bogota is doing. So this is the intent, right? Is to kind of bring some of those lessons learned so that other cities can benefit from it. So the objectives of my presentation today are to present solutions to the financing solutions, commercial solutions to some of the challenges associated with E-Bus deployment. The first one is really to summarize the risk and the challenges, the barriers that we know. I think most people on this call today are already aware of those barriers, but just so we're on the same page, I want to summarize them and present them so that we know what, we're all talking about the same thing. And then I want to talk about alternative models that can help municipalities address some of the challenges that we just talked about. And finally, understand what the municipality can do to really structure projects and to be active in this transition and to make those projects attractive to investors. So first, we need to talk about the traditional model, right? The models that we're seeing today and how those traditional transit models present real, tremendous, actually, risk to the municipalities. So first one, that we're all familiar with is capital cost. So we're talking about upfront capital, the amount of money that's needed on day one or day zero even. And we know that electric buses and their infrastructure, their batteries are very capital intensive. The second one is the local expertise. In a city like Bogota, where there's tremendous amount of expertise, it's not necessarily a problem, but in smaller cities, this new technology and so many things about electric buses are specific to the technology, to this solution. A lot of cities don't have the expertise to manage that. And the technology risk, obviously, around uncertainty around battery life. How long is the battery going to last? Is it going to last 5 years? Is it going to last 7 years? Is it going to last 10 years? Very little data on that. So that's a real risk for the municipalities. Operational risk. So we've all heard sort of horror stories about the reliability of e-buses, buses breaking down, buses that are unable to meet the operational requirements. So that's also a tremendous risk. And then charging infrastructure. So it's about budget. It's also about responsibilities. Who builds the infrastructure? Who pays for it? Who is responsible for it? And then public procurement. It's no secret that public procurement is lengthy, it's complicated, and in the context where municipalities have very aggressive targets for the deployment of e-buses, for the transition to an electric bus fleet, those delays can be a real challenge as well. Now, talking about traditional models a little more to really understand the difference with between the traditional models and the alternative models we want to talk about. Those traditional models really rely on municipalities in all areas of the project. So obviously funding, right? Municipality and the transit authority are managed funding, user fares, taxes, grants from the national government. Also manage the financing, right, of those projects, and municipalities are leading the finance. They're through various instruments like municipal bonds, green bonds for those who have access to it, government loans, commercial loans. It also leads the procurement with dealing with the different manufacturers, dealing with the infrastructure work. So the municipality is also taking the lead in that regard. And finally, the municipality is also at the center of the operational phase, from designing, building the infrastructure, financing it, owning it, all the way down to maintenance and the all-important end of life, and what happens to the batteries at the end, and when they're no longer usable in the vehicles. So as we can see with these models, the municipality and the transit authority are really taking responsibility for the entire project. So that's valid for these models that are led by the municipality. It's also valid for models where we have a private operator who's in charge of operating the fleet. And it's also valid for traditional models that we're seeing in many parts of the world, like Latin America, actually, where the private operator is in charge of most of it. And in this case, the municipality is not in charge of finance, procurement, and operation, but it is the private operator who's doing that. And what we see is that neither the municipality or the private operator is actually very well suited to tackle some of these things in the case of electric buses. So talk about risk now. Those traditional models, their key issue, the main issue is that they concentrate risk on the owner of the fleet. So if we look at financial risk, municipalities take tremendous risk when they're owning the fleet. And this is the same thing for the operator, right? There's also the demand risk, right? The number of passengers, making sure that their revenues are stable. And then the technology risk, battery life expectancy, range degradation, all of that is the risk that is that an asset owner and a municipality in this case has to bear. And the availability risk, making sure the buses are available every morning to start service at the depot. So a concentration of risk on the municipality and the asset owner. So it's not just about concentrating the risk and that those models concentrate risk. It's also about the fact that those models concentrate risk on entities like the municipality and the operators who are not well equipped to manage these risks. It's not just about concentrated risk, it's also about who it is concentrated on. In the case of the municipality dealing with over-indebtment, capital budgets under pressure, especially in the context of COVID, some municipalities having credit ratings that are not optimal or sometimes no credit rating at all, it all makes for an entity that is not well equipped to manage these very expensive capital-intensive projects. In the case of the operator, often we deal with smaller organizations that have, in many cases, real, very serious governance issues, lack of transparency around their finances, and in any case, very difficult access to capital. So not just about the concentration of risk on these players, but also the fact that these players are not very well equipped to manage these risks in the context of a very different type of asset like an electric bus and its infrastructure. So it's proposing alternative models, right? Looking at these models and acknowledging that these models they do not facilitate the adoption of e-buses and finding out what models are out there that can help adopt e-buses. And it's very good that we just had a presentation from Ms. Ortiz from Bogota, because those are the models that have evolved in cities like Bogota, like Santiago, and by trial and error, really. But looking at alternative models and how can we facilitate the adoption of e-buses? Well, we're talking about separating asset ownership from operation, talking about unbundling the transit model, meaning that we introduce a third-party asset owner to take care of most of these duties so that the transit authority and the municipality, their role is really the role of to operate the fleet and to oversee the system. It's also valid in a context where the municipality is not leading the operation, but we have a separate operator, in which case the municipality's role is really to oversee the system and regulate. So this is a diagram, very simple diagram, that summarizes the concept of separating asset ownership from operation or unbundling. So let's look at those alternative models. How are they actually structured? So you're looking at the traditional model here. This is the diagram that I presented early on. Same thing when it's led by a private operator. So how are those alternative models structured? Well, there's a municipality, obviously. There's also a private operator, but then we introduce an asset owner, which is different. And this is how we're separating asset ownership from operation. The funding side is still a responsibility of the municipality, right? We still have cities paying taxes, and we still have passengers that pay user fees to the operator. And we have a municipality that pays operation payment for passenger to the private operator. On the finance side, this is where it becomes very different. The municipality and the private operator don't have to be involved in the finance part. It is the responsibility of the asset owner to raise capital and to repay investors for procuring those assets. Capital projects, once again, the operator and the municipality don't have to be involved. It is the responsibility of the asset owner to deal with the suppliers and to have that capital expenditure up front. And finally, the operation part, Same thing, the asset owner takes responsibility for most of the duties, and the operator has a leasing contract with the asset owner and pays the asset owner a lease payment effectively so they can focus on operating the fleet. So a very different structure with a third party in charge of owning and financing the assets. Now let's go back to risk, right? We had a distribution of risk that was heavily concentrated on the municipality and the operator with the traditional model. So what does it look like under these alternative models? What does it look like with an unbundled model? Well, the risk is distributed, much better distributed, in fact. And we see that the financial risk is not really so much with the municipality anymore, and is very much with the asset owner. The demand risk, however, is still something that a municipality has to address, right? And depending on the payment structure we'll talk about in a minute, this is something that should remain with the municipality for the most part. And the technology risk is really taken away from the municipality and is shared much better actually between the asset owner and the manufacturer, because the asset owner is in a much better position to negotiate robust warranties with the manufacturers. And finally, the availability, well, that really is with the asset owner, right? Making sure that the buses show up every morning for service. So a much better allocation and distribution of risk. Now, this is the second part of the presentation, and it's really about structuring bankable projects. And Ms. Ortiz talked about how to create a structure that is bankable. And so I want to dive deeper into that and understand what the role of the municipality is. So this is the model, right? This is the model that we talked about of a separated, so unbundled, right, with a separation of asset ownership from operation. There are some key issues here. There are some key issues with this model, which again, we've learned about by trial and error, the different projects that we've seen across the world. The big one is the demand, right? Is the operation payment per passenger, meaning that when passenger demand fluctuates, payments fluctuate, which is a tremendous risk for an operator and an asset owner. So that is the #1 problem. The second one is a leasing contract. Leasing contract and payment that comes from the operator to the asset owner. That exposes asset owners to huge risk from the private operator. We've already said that private operators have governance issues. They are not always financially stable. And so we're dealing with a situation where asset owner is really exposed to the risk of an operator that doesn't work very well, that is financially not stable, and that could actually go bankrupt. So the asset owner is exposed to the risk of bankruptcy from a private operator that is in charge of actually paying them, right? And the last one is the payment issue that goes to the private operator. Again, the payment is routed through the private operator to the asset owner, which again is a tremendous risk for an asset owner and their investors. So how do we make bankable projects more bankable projects? Let's look at the first one, the demand risk. That one is pretty easy, right? Well, it's not easy, but it's instead of paying per passenger, paying per kilometer, which is, it's effectively, it seems easy on paper because it's just changing a word, but it just means that the demand risk is actually taken by the municipality. It's taken away from the operator, away from the asset owner, and it's a risk that is borne by the municipality. It's a huge change, but this is fundamentally what makes a bankable project, especially today in the context of COVID, where passenger demand is extremely uncertain and is fluctuating. So the demand risk is really the first one. Now let's look at the leasing contract, this issue of the leasing contract. That is one of the key lessons that were learned in some of the early implementation of this unbundled model, is that a bankable project often involves a separate contract. So the municipality, which is, as you saw, is what Bogota has in place today, a separate contract, one provision contract with the asset provider and one operation contract with the asset operator. And that is so that each party has their contract. Each party is subject to their own KPIs, their own performance requirements, and their payments are not dependent on each other. the last thing that an asset owner wants is for their payment to be dependent upon the performance of the operator, right? So those separate contracts are tremendously important. And finally, we're talking about cash flow, and we're talking about the way the payment is routed. And for that, it's a little more complicated, and what we're working towards, and it's something that the industry and cities are still working towards, is to create a separate bankruptcy remote trust fund, independent from the municipality, independent from the private operator, so that it can isolate parties from each other and isolate parties from the risk of bankruptcy of the other parties. So how does it work? We still have municipality and we still have passengers. Municipality paying subsidies into the trust fund, and passengers so paying user fares into the trust fund, as opposed to paying them to the private operator, right? So that is a centralized fare collection system, centralized fare box, if you want to call it that. So the fares, passenger fares, are no longer going through the operator. And then the trust fund, there's two streams of payments: availability payment going to the asset owner, and an operations payment going to the operator. Two separate streams of payment. And finally, the operation contract with the private operator, with the municipality, and the provision contract between the asset owner and the municipality. So that is a truly separated model, right? There is no longer a connection between the asset owner and a private operator. It is a true separation of asset ownership from operation. So just summarizing that, and you'll have access to the deck later. The solutions that we talked about to improve bankability, payments that are based on demand remote KPIs, separated contracts between operation and provision, fleet provision, optimizing fare collection with a central fare box, centralized fare collection system, segregating payments early on so that the asset owner is not exposed to the financial stability and financial health of an operator, bankruptcy remote trust fund. And one thing we need to mention is the municipality credit risk, to make sure that municipalities stand behind their payment obligations, and make sure that there are clear guarantees that are backed by the administration and backed by legislation. So 5 key takeaways, and that'll be the end of my presentation. 5 key takeaways. Number one, there is more than one way to procure infrastructure. The models that are in place today, the models that have been in place for decades sometimes, are not the only ones, and we're seeing new models emerge, especially in the context of electric mobility. Second takeaway is that unbundling transit models can really help distribute risk among stakeholders. And also, that unbundling itself does not create bankable projects. And having this better allocation of risk does not mean that the project is going to be bankable, does not mean it's going to attract investors. Municipalities must lead structural and institutional changes, and that's what I was saying. Municipalities have to work hard, the same way that Bogota has worked hard to make those projects bankable and to create the environment for investors to come in. And that's it. So these are my 5 takeaways. Thank you for listening, and thank you to GIZ and ICLEI for inviting me.
Thank you very much for this very clear and analytical presentation, Anthony. We have 2 questions here from the chat. I think they are about the same main issue, probably. The question about the money into the system. One question is about from the perspective of the municipality. What does change when there still continues the need for subsidizing the system? What does change for the municipality regarding this risk? And the other one, I think, is also linked to this. What can it help with regard to the situation under COVID, where we have a lot of municipalities and public transport systems under pressure? How can this unbundling help, or these alternative models help cities? Situation. Maybe you could shortly.
Thanks.
These questions.
Yeah, of course. I'll answer the first one from Avery. if the municipal government subsidizes the new unbundled model, how does that alleviate their risk? So the unbundled model does not mean that the municipality is not going to take on any risk, right? But it alleviates a big part of it. The first one is, like I said, like in my slide about the risk allocation, there's different types of risk, and the demand risk and the need to make sure that the municipality does take on the demand risk, so the fluctuation in passenger demand, which means potential subsidies, right? Does not mean that that services need to be subsidized. It just means that if passenger demand is not sufficient, then it might be a need for subsidies. So yes, the municipality should consider taking on at least part of that risk, because investors are not going to come in if they have to bear that risk. But there's still the technology risk, right? How long are the batteries going to last? Is the bus going to operate? Is the bus going to go uphill? Is it going to run 200 miles? Is it going to complete the route? All of those are also key risks that the municipality under the unbundled model does not have to take on. So you're correct that part of it, so the demand risk specifically, remains with the municipality, but most of the other risks, so the technology, the availability of the vehicle, the batteries, the what to do with the batteries at the end, the procurement, the financial risk, the risk of over-indebtment, all of that is effectively taken away from the municipality. Like I said, it doesn't mean that it's risk-free from a municipality's perspective. The next one is expand on if these alternative models can help cities in post-COVID environment where municipal budgets are under tremendous pressure. That's a really good question. Yes, so absolutely, and this is why we're kind of trying to talk about these models today in this context, because we hear from municipalities that capital budgets are under tremendous pressure, and in many cases, capital budgets have disappeared effectively. They're under huge amount of stress. So the goal of these models is to take away the capital pressure, so that municipalities can really focus, especially in the context of COVID, municipalities can focus their capital budgets on things that are critical today, and that are not going to attract investors. Things like sanitation, schools, healthcare, right? Things that are very, very difficult to separate from a municipality and to find private operators for, right? So those capital budgets that are under pressure need to be used for essential services, and so we're presenting models that can allow that to transfer from capital to operational budget.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there was another. The idea of a centralized fare box could apply within a traditional model. Municipal government can see a transit system as an easy area to make budget cuts. So could this perhaps help separate funds differently? Yeah, so the centralized fare box, frankly, I always say that it is the #1 change that a municipality should implement. Before even talking about electric buses, before even talking about unbundling, having a centralized fare box so that the passenger fares are not routed through the operator, but the passenger fares are collected in a central fare box by the municipality. That it's the #1 change that has to be implemented before even anything else. So it's the #1 ingredient for a viable transit system, I think. So absolutely, the central fare box is something that can apply to traditional models as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. With regard to the time, I would like to thank you for your presentation and for your questions. The answers, any other answer could also be discussed here in the chat. So I'd like to give the floor to Christian, WI Brazil, as an urban mobility manager, and I'm very glad to welcome her here today. since I have been working together with her on some electric bus issues in Brazil in the past 3 years. So I'm glad to hear that she can share together with us her insights into the situation in Brazilian cities. So, dear Cristina, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Jens, for the invitation and for sharing this panel with other really good presentations. So thank you for GIZ and ICLEI for the invitation. And I'm going to explain a little bit how we are right now in Brazil, the context of e-buses and everything. It's not going into the details a lot as previous presentation from Anthony that really well explaining all the details for the new business model and this kind of things. But the idea of my presentation is really giving you guys a broader context of Brazil right now in the e-buses scenario that we have. I hope you already can see my screen, so I'm not being able to, okay. So a little bit of the context of Brazil, of the potential market that we have in the country. We have right now about 107,000 buses being part of public transport systems in Brazil. This is spread all over the country for about 52% of the municipalities that we have in Brazil that counts with formal public transport services. And the average age of the buses right now in Brazil, looking for the current market, mainly from diesel buses, it's about 5 years and 10 months. So, and most of the cities in Brazil can buses for 10 years maximum age. So we are right now in a really good place to start making the changes and putting the market for e-buses in Brazil to move faster and follow other countries like Colombia and Chile that are advancing much faster than us in Brazil and Latin America. So nowadays, we have in Brazil a really small number of these total buses, as I mentioned, as 107,000 buses in Brazil. We just have 247 electric buses in Brazil, being just 40 of them battery electric buses. The rest of the electric buses that we have currently in the country are trolley buses. How these cities are, which cities are advancing more in the country on the thematic of electric buses, battery electric buses? We have one of the best cities that are advancing in this direction as São Paulo. That's our biggest cities in the country that counts with a public commitment from a law that established some emissions target that the buses need to reduce for the years of the contract. Sorry, and the city we need to have for the next 15 years about 14,000 buses for low emission standards, not being all of them electric, but probably they need to be electric as they need to reduce particular matter for 98% during the contract of the current contract in the city. But this is a path that we have to go with the cities. And nowadays, currently, we only have 15 battery electric buses running in the city as not as a pilot because they are already part of the current contract, but they are using these 15 buses to really monitor the operation and really understanding the autonomy of these buses, the efficiency of these buses, the times they need to be recharging, and how these operations need to change from the current scenario from diesel buses in the depots and everything. So they are using these first 15 buses to really understand how they need to change their daily routine for operators and really starting to increase this number of buses. Another important thing to mention from São Paulo, right now, the current contract has 32 different private operators running the entire system in the city. And the operators are right now presenting their fruitful newer timeline for the next 15 years. So operators are really looking for this integration of electric buses in their next year. So they are probably starting massive implementation, so going for more than 80 to 100 buses in the city of São Paulo for next year, 2021 in the city. Some other cities are going on the same direction to plan the implementation of e-buses in their fleet. I can mention also Campinas, that was the first city in the country to have more than 10 buses. Actually, they have 14 buses running in the city since 2015. And they are right now with a bidding process under development. And they are planning to have a specific area in the city that's going to be allowed electric buses to run in this area of the city. They are also planning some structural transport corridors in the city to run only with battery electric buses. They will be, if the process go smoothly and start the implementation for the new contract, they will have about 400 battery electric buses running in the city. In the first 4 years of the contract, that, if the timeline goes well, will be starting 2022. So by 2025, we are going to have these 1,400 buses running in the city of Campinas. We also have some other cities that are already operating battery electric vehicles, but in a small scale. I can mention some of them like Brasília, Maringá, Bauru, Santos, and Volta Redonda. But these cities are running numbers like 2-3 buses in their city to really understand and see the difference that the battery electric vehicles are going to have in their daily routine. And some other cities are also planning the introduction of e-buses in a more structural way, like Salvador and São José dos Campos. I bring here a photo for one of the buses that São José dos Campos already bought, and they are doing this bus only for one specific corner in their city. So it's going to be a really different bus, as you can see in this photo. The BYD and Marco Polo are really building the bus to run in the city, to be a little bit longer bus with covering the wheels and all these things, to have a different image also for this specific corridor. Will be all with electric buses. They already bought these buses and they are under development by the manufacturer right now. I also mentioned a lot of other cities that are interested in doing pre-feasibility studies and to understand how they need to change their daily operation, as I mentioned, like Curitiba, Fortaleza, Belo Horizonte, Florianópolis. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are going on this direction as a country with a lot of cities really interested to going in this direction, but still not being a really hard push for governments, federal government, and this kind of things. It's just like the willingness for each one of the cities that want to go in this direction, that's moving our country in this direction for now. But cities are really willing for going on this direction. But we don't have this movement as Chile and Colombia that are going more in depth and in structural way. So this is that we are going in this direction. We still have a lot of challenges that need to be overcome in the country to really have a massive implementation in other cities and the other regions of the country to have battery electric vehicles running their systems. But this is really natural when you're implementing a new technology. So it's not a challenge that other technologies in the past didn't need to work to overcome and having their technology deployed in the cities. I can mention we are looking for 3 different categories for challenges. I think Anthony already mentioned most of the things I'm going to show you guys right now, but it's more or less the same thing. But I want to point out that these are the main challenges that we are facing in Brazil. They're not really different for the global perspective, as Anthony just mentioned. In the technological challenges that we have right now, we have most related to lack of information. So a lot of times we don't have a lot of information to support the decisions and limitations related to vehicles and charging infrastructures. As Anthony mentioned, we have like some limitation on information on vehicle range, performance limitations where we are looking for hills, if they are going to be able to run up on hills. Restricted, we have a really big challenge in Brazil that's a little bit different from other countries in Latin America. That's this restricted electric bus market. We only have right now one manufacturer really deploying electric buses in the country currently, but other companies are looking to explore the market in Brazil. We as WRI are already consulting a lot of bus manufacturers to see when they are planning to start operations and selling electric buses in the market of Brazil. And we also have a different challenge looking for land, because when you're looking to battery electric buses, sometimes you need more land to be able to install the infrastructure and all these things. And this is one of the technological challenges that we can have for battery electric buses. For the financial challenges, one of the main financial challenge is the high capital cost and the necessary infrastructure that we need to have upfront costs with that. We have like the challenge here is that we have a limited number of financial institutions willing to make these investments. We have a lot of green funds and all these things, but the way the contracts are being done right now make this matchmaking a little bit difficult sometimes. And we also have another problem that Anthony mentioned very well, the difficulty. So a lot of times private operators doesn't have the capacity to be in depth to access these funds that have better rates to foster the implementation of e-buses. And then the institutional challenge, we have the lack of policies. As I mentioned, right now in Brazil, we don't have a federal policy that looks for the country implementation for e-buses. And we don't have a lot of times institutions that have autonomy and they are fragile to make these changes in infrastructure. And I want to mention here, even though we don't have nowadays when plan for the federal government to go in this direction, we have a movement from different institutions, NGOs and others. And we have right now established in Brazil a national platform for e-mobility that are discussing and will propose a national plan for the country to go in a direction for electric mobility in the country, not only for buses, it's more broadly the plan, but we will have a chapter looking for the public transport systems. So, in conclusion, we have a lot of challenges, but we also brings with the e-buses world a lot of new opportunities. We are developing and is being done for different institutions in Brazil, a lot of studies and research on this area of e-buses. We are also looking a lot for the deployment of new business model and change the way the public transport systems are doing for years and years, really traditional ways of business model. We have a really good opportunity to change these business models, and Anthony already did a really good explanation on all the details on different models that can be explored here. We also have a really good opportunity to industry and labor development, so going for a new direction on the industry for automobile in Brazil, because we are really in diesel related buses, so we can change and go for a green industry market that will have a potential for accessing a lot of different funds in the country. And as I mentioned, we have a really good opportunity for new plans and policies that can make easier and foster the implementation of sustainable mobility and clean buses in the cities in Brazil. More a general overview of the country. Thank you a lot again for the invitation being here today.
Thank you very much, Christina. Very interesting overview about the situation in Brazil and how cities are trying to tackle this challenge in Brazil. A lot of initiatives in very different cities in Brazil. Even though I think the number of electric buses is probably lower than in Colombia or Bogota, unfortunately, but I think you and other partners within the national platform and other initiatives are working on this and will be working on this. I cannot see any question here from the chat. Maybe they will raise up another question. With regard to the time, I would go on with my colleague from India, because we will jump from noon, midday in Brazil to the evening in India, 9 o'clock, if I'm not wrong. And yeah, the colleagues, we were talking right now about, very specific challenges in Bogota and the issues when it comes to the tendering of electric buses. We got an insight into the business models, the separation or the unbundling of the risks and financing models. The cities in Brazil that also are trying to attract financing and also investment, PID with the production plant in close to Sao Paulo, as Christina mentioned. But there is of course a big challenge also with regard to the capacity building, with the know-how when it comes to the management, implementation and operation of electric buses. And that's why our colleagues at GIZ India realized a study on the training needs assessment when it comes to the operation of electric buses. And my colleague Lagu would right now like to present the results, the outcome, the findings of this study. So thank you very much for your time, Lagu, and please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jens. Thanks for inviting me. I hope my presentation is visible. Hello? Yeah.
Your slide, but it's not in the presentation mode.
It is in the presentation mode.
Still not in the presentation mode, but
okay, should I continue? Yeah.
No, but maybe you can go ahead. I think it's at least you can see the main slide.
Let me try it again. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure to hear my fellow speakers. Very interesting topics and the presenters. To start with, let me just give you a brief about setting up the context about India and its scale. Okay, we are the country of 1.3 billion people, 63 odd million plus cities, and 33% level of urbanization, which is in India. Close to 52 public transport authorities operate the bus transport system in India across. It comprises intra-city, city bus system, and also include the intercity system. Close to 52 public transport authorities. 140,000, sorry, approximately 140,000 buses currently are operating in India, out of which close to 45,000 are operating within the urban areas. And as per the assessment, if you look at the deficit, so when it comes on public transport supply and the bus supplies in urban areas, we are the deficit country. Okay, and as against the requirement, our deficit, as per the assessment, our deficit of the bus transport is somewhere in the range of 150,000 buses. So you can just think about the demand and supply gap, existing demand and supply gap in India as far as bus transport is concerned. So this establishes one fact that with or without electric buses, we need the buses, okay, to bridge that kind of a demand and supply gap. Now, as you set up the context, why did we started this study on the training need assessment? Why we touched upon the training need assessment area of the e-buses? So, if you look at the transition of the in last series of decades of transition of the buses and the kind of transition there are regulatory transition like Euro 1, Euro 5, Euro 6, and migration on the CNG operated buses, which are the regulatory requirement, which public transport authority cannot avoid. And there are voluntary transitions. Voluntary transitions are pertaining to the digitalization, okay, the implementation of intelligent transport system technologies, low floor buses adoption, rear engine buses adoption, and all those adoptions, technology upgradation pertaining to the, which are related to the volunteer, depending upon the capacity of the organization and the willingness of the organization, public transport authority. Now, if you look at these transitions, be it regulatory or be it voluntary transition in bus transport, the degree of success, I'm not sure about the other part of the world, but in India, the degree of success is very high. Degree of success and degree of failure is varying. Okay, and somewhere the same thing is being implemented successfully, but while the other city it is not being implemented. So this degree of success is quite a much varies with the capacity of the organization. Okay, and capacity of the people and the skill set of the people who are working in that particular organization. Okay, so it's not, and most of the time we have that particular technology to blame. Okay, the IT system. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, maybe, but I think the slides, they are not moving forward. I'm not sure if we should still see your title, or you're already on another slide.
Yeah, I'm still on the title.
Okay,
I'm just setting the context. Sorry. Yeah. So I lost the track. Yes. So I was talking about the degree of success, and the degree of success of all these technology transition depend upon the capacity of those organizations. Okay. And what happened is that ultimately, without realizing that what kind of capacities, upgradation, skill set upgradation you need to adopt that new technology, we start blaming that technology. And that's what happened. That's what already happened in series of these transitions, especially adoption of ITS systems. Just because the organizations, the people were not ready to adopt these kind of new technologies, they started blaming the technology. So taking these storyline and these learning from various technology transition in the bus transport, we realize that the next big transition is happening in terms of electric buses. And this is the one area where the cities and the people there need to upskill and reskill themselves for the sustainable adoption of the e-buses. Okay, the fate which have other technology transition has seen should not be there in case of e-buses, and that is where we found the motivation of doing this particular work, which is called the training in assessment. So this is just to setting up the context. And as I was talking about, we have the huge demand supply gap, and we are, while the other cities, my fellow speakers were talking about, and the other part of the world, they are migrating from conventional buses to the e-buses. While in our case, we are leapfrogging, probably in many cities, we will be leapfrogging that stage, because we are bridging that demand and supply gap directly from the e-buses. So just giving you a brief, probably after China at a national level, biggest national level subsidy is going on in India. So currently 64 cities are in process of procuring the electric buses, close to 6,000, 5,500, close to 6,000 buses. Buses subsidy has been provided to 64 cities at a national level. Okay, so this is a huge national level subsidy program is going on in Government of India. And currently 650 odd buses are under operation in India, which was result of the previous funding program. But the current funding program is much larger than the previous program. And all these buses are supposed to be operated on a gross cost contract, okay, because it is a pilot project. So as my previous fellow speakers was also talking about the risk distribution, and it was realized that under the GCC, gross cost contract in the kilometer provision, and the risk associated with the new technology in e-buses will be much lesser at a municipality at the city level. So it was decided to go ahead with the GCC contract. So the whole purpose was to sustainable adoption of the electric buses, to support the initiative, big initiative by the Government of India, and in terms of technology transition. So that was the whole purpose. I've already set up the context need for the study. So basically, objective, there are three main objectives to assess the training need requirement for the e-buses in the organizations, and it will have a training programs, and of course to deliver. And once we have those kind of a training need assessment, there will be some organizational changes may also require. Okay, in the existing structure of the public transport authority, we may or may not know, but the skill sets are changing, and the people are required to reskill and upskill. But at the same time, there may be a new skill requirement, new people requirement would be required in the existing organization structure. So this is again the objective of the this particular work. So how we started is basically, if you look at, there are two ends, there are two main stakeholders if we can categorize the stakeholders in the bus transporter. One is the supply side, who are basically the asset owner, the operators, the e-bus provider, infrastructure provider, which is the supply side stakeholder, and one is on the demand side stakeholder, so which is the public transport authority and the operator, in a way, municipal operators. So we create a framework we divided the entire life operational or overall operation functions of the e-buses. Bus operation we categorized into the 7 functions, and further those functions were divided into the sub-functions and the activities. Okay, and what all are the functions required for the start from procurement till the scrapping? I'll come on to that in a later slide. And the interaction was done with the stakeholders, as I was talking about the supply side and the demand side stakeholder. And the data collection was done through a structured questionnaire and a need assessment. The existing skill level assessment was done, and further it was followed by a need assessment, training need assessment requirement. And based on that, we are in the process of preparing a training modules and training program. And the last stage would be the preparation of the organization structure and the new resource requirement. And so one is the new resource requirement in the organization for sustainable operation, and the other is the reskilling of the existing resources. Okay, so this is the overall, and let me tell you, this is a work in progress, and I'll be giving you some briefing on what so far what we have found, and by next month we will have this entire work will be ready and will be ready for the public dissemination. Yeah. So as I was talking about, the entire bus operations was divided into 7 functions. Start from strategic roadmap and planning, which required the why one organization need a e-buses. Okay, that establishing the need for e-buses, what kind of what size of e-buses are required, what should be the capacity of the batteries. Okay, so those kind of requirements need to be established in terms of strategic roadmap and the planning. Technical specification design. Okay. Procurement. Okay, it has been assumed that the procurement of the e-buses will be similar to the conventional buses, which is not right, and which we have seen in the previous our experience in electric bus procurement, that it is pretty much different what we are used to in case of conventional buses. Operational requirement, route planning, route optimization, crew scheduling. All these are the things, and including the e-bus driving practice. Okay. This is another functions. Repair maintenance requirement. That's e-bus is entirely a different animal. While in the conventional buses there are 2,000 odd moving particles, moving equipment, and while in the electric buses, which are less than 20, we are clearly dealing with a new technology which we are not aware about. Okay, and this is the monitoring and the control requirement, which is the battery management system, ITMS system, and at the very last, which is particularly related with the environment, which is the scrapping and the recycling. Okay, what will happen? What will be the second life of the bus? What will happen at the end of the life of the bus? So all these, we have categorized the entire, all the functions into the 7 main functions, and these are basically the sub-functions. As I was talking about, we did the assessment including the 4 public transport authorities in India. They have experience of operating the electric buses currently, and so we did the supply side, which is the battery and the charging manufacturer, e-bus manufacturer, and the industry experts who are continuously dealing with the public transport authority on the other side of the public transport authority. So assessment was done at both levels. Okay, one is the public transport authority. What is their assessment about their own capacity against those activities which we have stipulated, and what is the supply side operator, e-bus manufacturer and charging infrastructure provider and experts has assessment about those similar activities as far as PTAs are concerned. So we want to have both assessment on the same questions which we asked. On a very broader level, what we have found was that as far as procurement is concerned, okay, the skill levels are pretty much higher. The perceived skill levels are higher, okay, and when the skill levels are higher, existing skills levels are higher, it means the training requirement is there. Okay, level of training need is less. Okay, but we found little contrasting views when it comes on public transport authority about their self-assessment, and when we ask the OEM, the bus manufacturer about appraising, assessing the public transport authority as on the procurement scale. So according to them, that as far as e-buses are concerned, the public transport authorities still need to do a lot of things which they were otherwise are not supposed to do in case of conventional buses. But on an overall scale, the procurement has a high level of existing skill level, and the level of training need requirement is pretty much there. While when it comes to repair and maintenance and scrapping and recycling, these are the two functions where the level of current skill level is very, very low. Okay, and when the skill level is low, the training need requirement is very high in these two areas. Similarly, on a broader scale, we have the functional, how various functions, what are the skill levels at a various functions level. So higher the skill level, low will be the training need requirement. We also had the briefing about when we were talking to the public transport authorities and the operator and all the supply side stakeholders. We also try to assess the challenges faced by the STUs, the public transport authorities, which is more or less associated with a lack of skills. My fellow speakers in the previous, they were talking about the various risks associated with that. I would say, except the high capital cost, all risks directly or indirectly are associated with the capacity and the training requirement at the end of the day. So, let's say for example of the strategic roadmap and the planning. Before cities, there are examples in our place where the cities, before even procuring, before even assessing about the energy infrastructure requirement and the associated infrastructure requirement for operating the electric buses, they procure the e-bus. And later on, they realize that what kind of energy infrastructure is required, and the funding requirement, they never made assessment about the funding required for the energy infrastructure requirement. So these are the small things which cities are supposed to know, and which leads to nothing like a suboptimal utilization of the buses when they were on the road. Okay, typical example is what kind of battery capacity you need. You need 250 kilowatt hour battery, or you need 150 kilowatt hour battery. Okay. So it totally depends upon operational requirement of your particular city. So just because a city is operating 300 kilowatt hour battery, it doesn't mean that you also need 300 kilowatt hour battery. So end of the day, you are paying much more than what you require to pay. Okay. So either you are underbuying or you are overbuying something. The asset. So these all these associated challenges are ultimately lead to suboptimal utilization of the asset, which is a very costly asset. Okay, which we as a country we cannot afford to have an asset which is being suboptimally utilized, but 2.5 times to 3 times costlier than the existing assets, which are the conventional buses. Okay, which is very high. Let's take one example. While we are trying to replace the buses, the replacement factor is as high as 1.8 to 1.5. Okay, it means that we are replacing the one diesel bus or the one conventional diesel or CNG bus with 1.8 or 1.5 electric bus, because the range is less, the capacity is less. Okay. And the breakdown rate and the replacement is very the spare capacity requirement is very high. which is collectively leading to the high replacement factor of the bus. So these kind of assessments are never be there when we compare the total cost of ownership of diesel bus versus the electric bus. So as I was talking about, this is again the broad outcome of the study, and all these functions and sub-functions are further we have categorized into the various roles into the public transport authority. So various roles will have a different requirement of the training, okay, and with different requirement of the upskilling. At a top level management, which is the MD and the CMD level, senior management level, head of the traffic, head of the infrastructure, head of MIS and the mechanical engineering department, and middle level management, same as the workman level. So all the different level will have a different requirement of the training, and which is being considered while doing this particular exercise. So again, we were, as I was talking about, it has been subcategorized as the role, and currently what we are planning is that we will have a close to 8 modules of training modules and 32 odd sub-modules. Okay, and these are 8 modules. As you can see, the fundamentals of the safety, which is a common module which we kept, which is applicable for all the roles, irrespective whether you are at a top management or at a workman level. So you need to understand about the fundamentals and the safety aspect associated with the electric buses. So this is the common module which has been kept, and all other modules are partly or fully specific to the any role. Further, all these modules has been divided into 2 categories, L1 and the L2 category. So L1 is basically, L2 is the detailed module, and L1 is the not so detailed module. Okay, so like at MD level, let's say top management level, you may not require to get into the repair or maintenance, detailing of the repair or maintenance, but you need to understand the major outcome of that particular detailing. Okay, so we have further divided all these modules in the L1 and L2 categories. Now, once we have all these modules ready, how to deliver it? So this is a broad framework for delivering this training program. We will have one training nodal agency, of course, at a national level, and there will be a partner ministry. Okay, and we will require a partner ministry who can take up this program at a national level. And there is industry partners who are basically the automobile associations or the bus transport associations, which is at a national level, and we would require various technical partners for creating those kind of modules, creating those kind of a knowledge base, which the modules which we have created, the content of the module has to be created, which could be global training institution, a national training institution, including the bus manufacturer and the battery and the charging manufacturer. They are also a party into creating the program. Existing academic institutions, because we have a module about the operation planning and the infrastructure planning, which is to some extent is related with what already our academic institutions are doing, not related to the e-buses, but overall. And similarly, various consultant or experts, and there are training institutions which are associated with directly or indirectly with the electric e-mobility in India. So they are proposed to be part of this. And ultimately, the beneficiary will be the public transport authorities. Okay. So they will be the ultimate beneficiary, and all these people will collectively contribute through the training nodal agencies in delivering this training and national level training and capacity building program. Another thing is which we are trying to do here is that, as I was talking about the training requirement. Okay, it may vary from role to role. Top management to the bottom management and the workmanship people. It will also vary depending upon the contracting model. Okay, so my fellow speaker was talking about the public-private partnership, gross cost contract, and lease contract. So of course, the training requirement of organization having outright purchase of the buses will be different for the organization who is operating the buses on a gross cost contract. And we are considering this very actively, and we are further subcategorizing all the modules and the content with respect to the mode of operation. Okay, you may not require to learn everything if you are operating the buses on a lease contract and the PPP contract. So this is, as I said, this is work in progress. By next month, we will have this all these modules and all what I was talking about detailing will be available in the public domain from next week. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Lagu. I'm quite impressed by this very detailed analysis of the demand for capacity building when it comes to electric buses, with a lot of different stakeholders and different management levels. Very detailed and very complex system. I'm looking forward to learn more about the models. I couldn't see any question here. My question would be if the modules and the content you will provide together with other partners, and it will be in English, so it can be shared later on, or will very specific and tailor-made for the different partners. But maybe I think it could be interesting also for attendees here in this round to learn more about this.
Yeah, so this level we will have these documents available in English. But the plan is that when we'll be disseminating and delivering these modules, so we would for the pilot demonstration we will try to translate them in the local language. So India is somewhere which has many languages, state to state. So, and frankly speaking, when it comes on bus transportation, English is not something which is recommended language for them. Okay? So it's best to have a local language for this. But for all these documents will be available in English, of course.
I think it's very interesting also to learn more about the methodology you realized to get to this analysis of the need for training assessment and all the stakeholders that have to be involved. Quite impressed by this work. So thank you very much. I cannot see any specific question here in the chat. Probably this is my fault because we did not finish this session into time and people probably have other meetings and other work to done. So my fault maybe, but I would like to thank all the speakers for their time, for their very interesting presentations, and the attendees for their questions and their interest in our session. I think we had some interesting discussion here. Since the session was recorded, I think also the people that were not able to attend right now will be able to attend to learn more about the content later on. And I will also provide the presentations of the speakers bilaterally to the people that are getting in touch with me or via the organizers, the ICLEI. I would also like to thank ICLEI for the organization of the whole conference and the site event. I hope that we could inspire some cities to be doing when it comes to the electrification of public transport. And as cooperation and especially the TUMI World initiative and the E-Bus Mission, together with a lot of partners that we're here today like C40 Cities, WI, ICLEI, but also others, we will be happy to get in touch with you when it comes to share this kind of experiences and content about electrification of public buses. So thank you very much for your interest. And have a nice afternoon.